The main character, Edward, decided to meet with old friends and chose the path through the forest instead of the usual highway in order to shorten the route. This choice promised adventure, but he did not expect the adventures to begin so soon and be so alarming. As he drove through the thickest and darkest corners of the forest, where old trees with their branches, like twisted bones of old men, strained towards the pale disk of the moon, Edward felt a strange mixture of feelings. He felt as if he were trapped in the night, and at the same time felt completely vulnerable in the face of indescribable darkness. His faithful travel companion, the old but reliable car Adil, suddenly let out a long metal-on-metal groan. A treacherous, sharp stone on the road punctured the tire, thus halting their journey for an indefinite amount of time. Edward, cursing everything, and especially his fatal decision to shorten the route, got out of the car into the pitch-black darkness. He almost immediately felt the cold wind seeping through his clothes, carrying whispers. Indistinct but clearly audible words floated in the air, creating the impression that the forest itself, its ancient trees, and unknown inhabitants had come to life on this ominous night. They seemed to whisper among themselves, exchanging opinions about the unexpected guest, his misfortune, and possibly even discussing his fate. Becoming more and more aware of his vulnerability in the heart of such a primitive and unknown environment, Edward felt increasing unease. Trying to compose himself, he looked around in case the surroundings offered a solution or hint. However, apart from the dark outlines of trees and the barely discernible path back to the road, he found nothing reassuring. The situation seemed dire, and Edward realized that he would have to rely solely on himself to escape from this ominous place. Edward spread out all the necessary tools under the light of the lantern, which seemed to be the only protection in this mysterious darkness. Unfolding the jack, wrench, and spare tire, he got to work, trying to distract himself from the inexplicable anxiety that had overcome him. Suddenly, a cold wind whispered in his ear, and Edward shuddered, looking around, but everything remained motionless. Only the trees continued their whispering. He tried to focus on changing the tire, gripping the wrench tightly. However, his efforts were hampered by a pervasive sense of something mysterious. Every step he took elicited whispers and rustling of leaves. At one point, it seemed like a quiet, deep sigh was heard from somewhere to the left, so human-like and yet unnatural that Edward froze in place, holding his breath. He expected the darkness to swallow him, but it did not happen. Instead, the emptiness of the forest seemed to respond to every movement he made, creating an illusion of a presence that could not be explained. Moving the lantern to better illuminate the work area, Edward noticed strange footprints near the car. They did not resemble animal tracks he could recognize, nor human ones. This discovery only heightened his anxiety, as it meant that someone or something different from an animal could be hiding in the forest. Nevertheless, unable to give in to the anxiety and trying to strengthen his resolve, Edward continued with the task. He felt that every noise behind him sounded louder, every rustle seemed closer, as if the forest was holding its breath in anticipation of his next move. The tire replacement on the verge of completion made him forget about the anxiety at times, but a disconcerting glance into the depths of the forest reminded him that he was still in a foreign and potentially hostile world. Just need to get out of here in time, he thought, finishing the final touches of the work. Edward, having finally finished replacing the wheel on his Edel, felt a moment of relief that was immediately shattered by a feeling of cold running down his spine. Closing the trunk with a squealing sound of metal, he instantly froze in horror, feeling someone's gaze on him. Looking up, he discovered figures before him, flickering in the night darkness, with eyes glowing with unnatural light. They stood motionless, but that stillness was deceptive, concealing a hidden threat, incomprehensible and alien. Unable to make himself move or even scream, Edward stood, staring at them, like a rabbit caught by a boa. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" he asked, although his voice sounded incredibly distant and alien, almost as if he was shouting from another dimension. The creatures slowly approached, their shadows stretching across the ground, creating the illusion of multiple hands reaching out towards Edward. None of them spoke a word. Their silence was louder than any screams, filling Edward's soul with horror and despair. In that moment, Edward realized that he was not facing just the unknown, but something that lived by its own ancient and incomprehensible laws. These entities were from another world, or perhaps from the deepest depths of history, about which we only sometimes whisper in nightmares. Knowing that escape was pointless, Edward tried to maintain at least a shred of dignity in this final stand before the face of endless and black void. But his legs gave out when the creatures began to touch him, their touches as cold as ice and as deadly as an abyss. Edward came face to face with the unknown, and in this final act, unable to fight or flee, he understood something deeply disturbing. The world is as vast as it is mysterious and dangerous, and the night is filled not only with stars, but also with dark forces whose ambitions are unfathomable to human understanding. The next stage of Edward's adventure was overshadowed by the stormy shadow of reality, blending with the previous ghosts of his night experience. Edward's friends, gathered around the campfire on that unforgettable night, occasionally exchanged jokes and guesses about the whereabouts of their missing friend with a smirk. Their conversations playfully slid from assumptions of absurd misfortunes to fantastic stories of alien abduction, unaware of the real threat lurking in the shadow of the night. At dawn, as the first rays of the sun broke through the trees, dispersing the darkness, and the atmosphere of yesterday's adventures began to dissipate like smoke, the friends gradually dispersed to their homes, leaving behind forgotten jokes about their friend. However, the next day, when life seemed to have returned to its usual course, a disturbing news appeared on local television, instantly capturing the attention of all viewers. The news of another brutal murder by cannibals last night caught not only Edward's friends off guard, but the whole community. The report described the dark details of the discovery in the forest, which random passers-by found at sunrise the remains of a person surrounded by mysterious symbols and campfire traces, indicating the conduct of some ancient ritual. The public was horrified, while the police urged all residents to remain vigilant and report any suspicious activity. For Edward's friends, this turn of events was a grim awakening to the harsh reality of their jokes. As the search for Edward continued, the details of the news made their hearts stop with fear and guilt, realizing that their friend could have become a victim of this nightmarish horror.